series of 3 webinars on the topic of teams, working with people, inspiring people, listening to your people, managing your people. One of the toughest parts of the job that there is, whatever it is you do in Jewish education or in Jewish communal work, managing people is the bit that they don't always tell you about, because it's not about content or, you know, learner experience, but it's actually probably about the most important part of our work, managing other people. And that's what we're going to do. Welcome, Hannah. Hope you can hear me. I can't see you yet. Johanna also. If you've got your, I'm going to just ask you if you have your video off right now, you could just turn it on for a minute. There you go. Hi, Hannah. Just turn it on if you can. It's always good to see people's faces at the beginning, and later on, if you need to turn it off, you'll do what you need to. Thank you for joining us. Good to see you all. So as I say, this is the first of a series of 3 workshops, which maybe you'll come back to the others, maybe you won't, that's up to you. But the first one, we're going to focus on inspiring and motivating other people. How do you get other people to do what you want them to do? Of course, we could spend way more than just an hour workshop on this. There's a whole series of huge field of psychology all about that. We're not going to get into all of that. I'm going to offer you 2 pieces, 2 sort of tools that will help us get into that. I'm just going to show you what we're going to do. This is essentially what we're going to do. We're going to start right now with a very, very short welcome. Then we're going to do a small group breakout, and you're going to think about your own team that is going to be the case study for you for the rest of this session. And then we're going to offer 2 different pieces of tools to think about. The first one I'm calling channels of persuasion, and I'll explain where that comes from. And the second thing is a focus on inspiration and purpose, particularly values, which if you've been in an M² seminar at some point, you know that values are very big for us. And so I'm going to try and use some of our ideas about values to help you think about motivating your people. So that's really what we're going to do. And what I'd like you to just start by doing is rename yourself for a second. I'm going to just stop my sharing. Rename yourself just so we can see something about you. And if you need to know how to rename yourself, you can see your little box with your picture in it, with your image in your screen. In the top right-hand corner of your box, there's a little blue box with 3 dots. And if you press that little box with 3 dots, you should have an option to rename yourself. So if you can go into that and rename yourself, you can leave your first name. Tell us which city you are finding us from, and if necessary, if relevant, the organization that you work for, just to give us a sense of who's in the room. So I'm in Jerusalem, I work for M². Rename yourself. Again, the top right-hand corner of your screen with your picture in it, there are 3 little dots. It should give you an option there if you press on it to rename yourself. If anyone needs help on any technical things, Emily Faber, my wonderful colleague who's in Memphis and works for M², she is here to help. So you can send her a message in the chat and she will help you. Okay, so we have people from all over the United States. We go all the way from several Californians, all the way to Ithaca, past Miami, past Boston, past Kansas City. Who am I missing? Northampton, Kansas City again. Oh, that's good. So we're covering the map, and we're also covering a range of organizations. Hi, Ira. Good to see you. Fairfield, Connecticut. Thank you for joining us. So that's who we are. And what we're going to do right now is jump straight in to small group work together. And what is GMJF? Does somebody work for GMJF? Miami. Johanna, what is that? Tell us.
It's the Greater Miami Jewish Federation. I just wasn't sure if it was going to fit with my long name.
It definitely wouldn't have fitted. It definitely wouldn't have fitted, but thank you for telling us. I mean, you're from Miami, so I guess that already helps us, but thank you. Okay, so we're going to split into groups of 4, and in a minute, Emily will send you in your mysterious way into a group of 4, and you're going to be there for 15 minutes. And what you're going to do is the following. The first thing that you're going to do is just introduce yourself to the other people. and say hello to them. And if you want to do a little bit of small talk, feel free to do that. And then you're going to jump into the task. And the task goes like this. Everybody gets 3 minutes. Try and keep yourself to 3 minutes. If you want to have someone time you, that's a good idea. And in your 3 minutes, you're going to share with the other people in your small group the team that is your team that you're going to talk about today. Who are those people and how are they connected to you and each other? Okay? That's what I want you to think about.
Claire,
okay.
Quick question.
Yes.
Do you
Yes.
want 442 or 55? Strange number.
That's a good question. Let's do 442.
Okay.
Let's do 442. Actually, wait, what does 442 add up to? No, let's do 3, 3, and 4. Let's do, well, if it's too late, don't worry about it. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. Just send people away to do this task, to think about the team that they are in and who those people are and how they're connected to each other. And if you wrote this down on a piece of paper and you made a diagram, show it to each other.
So they will be.
Okay, 3 minutes each.
We'll send it back. We'll send them back.
Okay, everyone came back because I was confused about numbers. You're going to go back in a minute. Emily's going to send you back. Again, bring your diagram of your team and share it with each other. Everyone in 3 minutes, no more. If you're a 2, then you get a little bit more. So you can spend a bit more time on your team.
Okay, so if you're new, we're opening back the room, so I apologize. Off you go. Goodbye.
Okay. Accept and go. With a question in the center, what typically motivates your team members? Okay, what I want you to do as we're coming back is to answer that question on the whiteboard that you can see. So what you do, if you have never used a whiteboard, you can see at the top of your screen where it says you're viewing Emily's screen. And to the right of that, it says view options. And if you click on view options, you should have the option to annotate. And you annotate, and then you will have a series of possibilities like a little pencil or a mouse or an eraser, and you click on text and then your answer. So go to the top of the screen, annotate the whiteboard, and answer this question. What typically motivates your team members? Just give us a couple of answers on the whiteboard. What are the things that typically motivate your people? Free food, always a good one. What else? Go to the top of your screen, view options, annotate, and then press the text, the big T, and you should be able to type on the whiteboard. Great. Give us a few more options. We have, apart from free food, we also have our mission. We have the rabbi, acknowledgement and validation, absolutely. Okay, sense of community is very motivating. Partnership, great. Growth. Okay, these are all motivating factors. Great. If anyone has any more, take another 20 seconds to supervisor told them, right, that's a certain kind of motivation. Success that they see, giving to the community. Okay, multiple motivations, right? So if we're going to motivate our people, we have to start from the assumption that there are a lot of different possibilities for how people can be motivated. And what motivates me may not motivate you. And what motivates everybody in the team might also be very, very diverse. And that may already be true to you from your conversations. Great. Any others? So just take a look at all these motivating factors, and I want to show you a framework to think about all these different factors. Okay. Great. Radical amazement, family involvement, positive energy from the congregants, making a difference in students' lives. All these things motivate us and our teams. Great. I'm happy to see that the free food, which was a very instrumental thing at the beginning, was like slightly eclipsed by some bigger ideas coming further on. So great. Although I'm certainly in favor of free food. Okay, so Emily, if you can stop sharing your screen, and I want to show you all just one model for thinking about how to motivate your people. And this comes from a book called The Art of Woo, which means woo stands for winning over others. And it's an interesting book about how to convince people to do stuff. And one of the things that they talk about in this book, I think, is very helpful here. And what they talk about is what they call channels of persuasion. How do I persuade somebody to do something? If I'm trying to motivate them in some form, I'm trying to persuade them to basically do something. What are the ways that they can be persuaded? And the authors of this book, The Art of Woo, identify what they call 6 channels of persuasion, which I just think is a very helpful rubric for thinking about how we are motivated to do things. And so as you're thinking about what we just wrote on the whiteboard, most of them, I think, pretty much correspond to these different channels, which I'm just going to explain. And then we're going to go back and think about the teams that you've already been talking about. So the first channel of persuasion is the channel of authority, and that's pretty simple. That's you're going to do what I'm asking you to do because I told you to, because I have authority, either because I have some kind of, title or organizational chart, role model, role thing for you that you have to do as I told you to, or because maybe I have legal power over you, whatever it is. But there's an authority, you don't have a choice. The second channel of persuasion is about interests. This is in your best interest to do this. If you do this, you will get a great resume, you will make more money, you will have a fantastic reputation, you will benefit in it for some reason. Very simple. In that the free food may be this also, right? In other words, I'm hungry, I'm a hungry college student, and there's free pizza. So that's why I'm going to be persuaded to do this particular activity or do this thing. So it's also a type of interest, is the free food kind of thing. The third channel of persuasion is what we call politics. Politics is the sense of where other people are involved. Everyone else is doing this. All the other organizations in our city or community are up to this. All the other people who we need to pay attention to are worried about this. Our funders want us to do this. It's trendy, it's fashionable, it's whatever it is, but other people are doing it, so we need to follow them. Okay, I think that's probably somewhat familiar to some of you. Number 4, rationality. This is where it just makes most sense. You should be doing this because out of all the options, this is the one that is logical and makes sense. There are lots of people in the world for whom rationality is a primary motivator. There are loads of other people for whom rationality is not their first channel of persuasion. Probably if you're depending on your Myers-Briggs category and how your personality goes. But there are people who, once I've explained, this is the rational thing to do, this is the logical thing, this is A, B, C, D. Oh, okay, now I get it, I'll do it. Inspiration, number 5. That is the one about mission, about purpose. Why are we doing this? Because we believe in the Jewish people. Why are we doing this? Because we think we're making the world better. Why are we doing this? Because it's in our values. There's a higher purpose, and this is what keeps me going every day. This is the one, a particular one that I think we trade on a great deal in the Jewish community and in Jewish education, because sometimes it's not necessarily in our best interest. Sometimes it's not even rational, but we're doing it because we're inspired. And we're going to get back to that in a minute. And the last channel of persuasion I'm just going to mention is about relationships. Why are we really going to do this? I'm going to do it because I asked you. Relationship. Maybe this is where the rabbi comes in. I have a relationship with a rabbi, and he or she has a special, pull or a special channel of persuasion that I will do what they say because I really trust them, I believe in them, etc. And the relationship is important to me. So all those channels of persuasion come into play when we're trying to motivate people to do things. And what I want you to just do for a second is, by the way, I'll just say that many of us operate with many channels of persuasion, right? What I might find that 2 or 3 things are my preferred channels. And there might be others that I tend not to worry about too much, but you can certainly have more than one operating at the same time. But what I'd like you to do, well, let me just ask you, are there any questions? Let's just take questions for 1 second and see any clarifications? And then we'll talk about it in a minute. But first of all, clarifications. And if you have any questions for clarification, just ask, because I cannot see your hand raised because I'm sharing my screen.
Claire, it's Annie. Just a question about this. So in a sense, being able to categorize this gives us a sense of just naming it, having a sense of where we are, what's our context before we even try to make a change or think about where we might want to head. Just being able to evaluate the situation and say, what context is this persuasion in? Then we can think about going forward, correct?
Correct. Especially because if you're finding it difficult to motivate people, then the question that you're going to ask yourself is, am I using the channel of persuasion that's working for them? It may be that if you're feeling that, you've got this team of people and suddenly they're just like not motivated to do whatever needs to be done, then you really can think to yourself, and we're going to do this now in a second, you're going to go back to your chart of people and your team, and you're going to ask yourself, what channels of persuasion do you think work for those people, each one individually, and see if you can identify the one or two channels that you think are their preferred channels. What tends to work when you talk to so-and-so person? Does it tend to work when you you relate to your relationship, or does it tend to work when you try and talk about their best interests? What do you think works for each person? And I want you to also, for a minute, as you're doing this, reflect on what are the channels of persuasion that work for you. What do you prefer? When someone, your boss or your board or your colleagues or your family even, are trying to persuade you to do something, what do you prefer? What tends to work well? So what I'd like you to do is take 4 minutes, take yourself off camera for 4 minutes, look at I'm going to leave the screen up here so you can see the channels. Take yourself off the screen, although if you can, leave the audio so that you can hear me calling you back, and just jot down on your little chart or on a piece of paper each person and what you think their preferred channels are. Okay, bit of self-reflection, 4 minutes, go. Okay, you have 2 minutes. And as you're working on this, consider the last time that you had to try and persuade each of those people. How did you use this channel of persuasion? What did you say to them? Or what didn't you say to them that maybe you think would have worked better? Just think about the specifics of what do you say in the interests, or what do you say to appeal to rationality? Just think about what you did say or what you could have said. Okay, you have another minute. Okay. Okay, 10 more seconds. Just finish looking at your situation, at your people, and then come back on. Okay. What did you notice? Without telling us the story of your whole group and team, what did you notice from that exercise? You can either write it in the chat or feel free to raise your hand, Raya.
It's not about educators. It's more like about parenting the kids. I would never use any of those channels of persuasions, because I can't tell a kid because I told you so, or because you're going to do this or you're going to do that, because everybody learns differently and they may not find an interest in it. We have to bring them so that it will be interesting.
Yes. Yes, it's an interesting question to compare. Actually, we were talking about teams, right? Which is assuming adults, it's assuming a certain kind of work relationship, which is potentially different than trying to convince a group of students in my class.
Let's think about the grown-ups. Let's think about parents. Let's think about community, okay? Mm-hmm. Nobody likes to hear just because everybody else is doing it, or just because I told you so, or nobody likes it.
Some people respond very well to just everyone else is doing it. You may not say it in exactly that way, but a lot of people do a lot of things because everybody else is doing it. So it's an interesting, I actually think that a lot of time, there are plenty of people who, but maybe those are not the people that you work with. Maybe you have to think of other channels. Yes, Jessica.
Well, because everyone else is doing it was making me think of all the organizations that are making statements on Black Lives Matter, but have no intention of making any changes and like really don't stand behind the message. It's more just a PR stunt to continue to get people to shop their brand, for instance. But something that I noticed is I have, in terms of what I identified as channels for me and what I identified as channels for my supervisor, were almost a complete mismatch. Mm-hmm. And so that makes a lot of, if she responds to authority, politics, and rationality, and I respond to rationality, relationships, and inspiration, it's going to be hard.
Yes, 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 absolutely. Yeah, Melinda.
What was interesting to me about the last thing you asked us to do, to write down like what we said or how we motivated someone, is that actually was like a light bulb moment for me, because what I thought was the best approach for this one individual, when you said, give an example, once I gave the example, I was like, oh, actually, I used a different approach and it worked very well. So that was kind of a light bulb moment for me.
Great. Anyone else? What else did you notice? Sometimes we are not always, I think this relates to what you're saying, Melinda. Sometimes we don't actually know what would work best for the other people in our teams, or we kind of discover it like through trial and error, or sometimes there's a mismatch, Jess, and we don't know why there's really a mismatch, but actually that's one of the reasons, because they need a different kind of channel of persuasion to what's natural to me. And so when I have to give them like rationality and facts and numbers and all of that, and I really just want to give them a big speech about why we're doing something so important for the world, but they're not interested in that. They need me to give them like the budget with the numbers and the explanation. So, you know, I could either say, well, it's just because my boss is like a miserable person who doesn't care about our mission, or I could say, actually, that my boss just needs a different channel of persuasion, and it's probably in my interest to motivate me to come up with a better thing, a better tactic. And yes, I think, Johanna, you're absolutely right. It is situational, 100%. Sometimes channels of persuasion depend on the situation. What's going to work best, either in the context, the situation, the needs of the moment. Absolutely. Okay, so I want to take us one step further from the channels of persuasion, which I would encourage you to use and even discuss with your teams, and even have a conversation about it and ask people to reflect on their own, and then see if you all agree, and come up with a way that you as a team can kind of name these different channels, because it's helpful sometimes just to talk about them and to admit this, I need rationality. Please just give me rationality. Like, that's what I need. And once you have a language for that, it might be helpful. So I want to take it though one step further from that. And I want to focus for a minute on the inspirational one, because I think that often in our work, we, you know, if I can assume that most of us are not in this for the money, and we're probably not in this for the glory, or we're in this for the mission, right? Jewish, and certainly we trade on this. We expect people to be in it for the passion and for the mission and for the purpose and the values, and we often, you know, don't treat them that well and pay them badly and expect that the mission will carry them on. And so I want to focus that for a minute, because I do think that sometimes to motivate one's team around passion and mission and values is really, really critical. As a group, I've got this group and they're not functioning so well. How can I motivate them around our passion, around our mission, around our purpose? And if I ask that question, I find myself thinking about M squared, because we talk about values a lot. And we talk about values at the center. And if you've been in any of our signature programs or some of our programs, you know that we talk a lot about values. And we talk about values in two different ways. And so I want to just bring you to that, because I think that can help us. And to think about thin and thick. We talk about thin and thick values, which I'm just going to, in very, very short, just say what that is. We talk about values, pick a value, right? The value of, let's say, solidarity or community or truth or hope or love, or any of those big values that are behind our organizations. And we talk about them as thin ideas and thick expressions. The thin idea of a value is the idea, the name, the word, solidarity. It's a big idea. It is very universal. It is very general. Everyone can get behind it. Solidarity is a fantastic idea. No one's really going to say it's a bad thing. We're all very for it. In practice, however, it doesn't really express itself in any way unless I like dig down. What do I mean solidarity? Solidarity between people of a certain background, solidarity of people who share something in common. I don't know, solidarity of people who have all gone through the same experience. What does it mean? Solidarity, at what cost and when? I have a thick expression of solidarity. I have a thin idea of it, sort of up here, universal, and then I have a thick expression of it, which might come into something like a Jewish idea about Kol Yisrael Arevim Zeh B'Zeh, right? All Jews are responsible for each other. That's a Jewish thick expression of a very general, universal idea. Now, why am I saying all this? For all values, in M squared, we talk about thin ideas, which are very great because they're very universal and very all general. And then thick expressions, which are important because that's how we actually see them in the world. And when I have a thick expression, I can have multiple thick expressions of any given value. Now, that's like very briefly stated. However, my question is now, and I want you to think about this. Two questions to think about for your team when it comes to values and purpose. One, do your team members actually know what values you want them to be gathered around? Do they actually know what your values are? And what do they think about those values? What do they think they mean? And do they identify with them? And the second question is, how do your team members experience your values? Do they experience the value of your organization or your program as a thin idea? Or do they experience it as a thick expression? What do I mean by that? So for example, let's say your value of your organization is, one of your values that guides you is, I'm going to say a complicated one, but I think it's helpful, Israel, right? Israel. A lot of our organizations, schools maybe, or sometimes your synagogues, are one of our core guiding value is like Israel as the state or the land of Israel, however you want to put it. As a thin idea, you can say, great, like, of course, Israel, it's a fantastic idea. It's very generalized. But as a thick expression, what does that mean for your people? Does that mean you should speak Hebrew? Does it mean you have shlichim in your school or your synagogue? Does it mean that you're trying to encourage your learners to make aliyah? Does it mean that you support a certain political position related to Israel? What does Israel actually mean in practice? Now, when I ask you about the value and you want to motivate your people around the value of Israel, do you think that they're experiencing your value as a very generalized idea, or are they experiencing a very specific expression of Israel? And if they're not motivated by that value, is it because perhaps it's too thin or too thick? Okay, questions. I'm not sure if that's clear, if I've said enough, so I'm going to just stop sharing my screen for a second and ask for questions. Does that make sense? In other words, first we ask ourselves, do my people actually know what the values are and do they identify with them? That we're going to talk about in a second. And then let's say they do know what the values are. I know that the value of my community is family, Israel, and tikkun olam, right? Do they experience those values in a thick way? And is that good? Does that work for them? Or do they experience it in a very thin, generalized way? And does that work for them? And if you're finding that it's too generalized, you might need to think about how they can really get to that expression that's thicker. And if you find that that's just too specific, that they would identify with Israel, but when you talk about it like just making aliyah, that's just too thick. And if you zoom out and make it more general, maybe they'll be more motivated. So that's a kind of a diagnostic way. So I'm going to now be quiet and ask for comments and questions. How does that make sense?
Is it about making it either moving along the spectrum of identification, so that team members identify with them and are motivated by them?
Yes. In other words, I'm assuming that we want our team members to be motivated by the values either of our organization, or maybe just like our organizational values. Maybe we're going to be motivated by the value of excellence, or the value of, innovation, or something like that, which might just be our team value, right? We always do everything with excellence, or we always very creative. And then we want to use that spectrum to find the right place that's going to motivate them the most. So if they're not motivated enough, or as much as you would like, then we use it and we say, where on this spectrum, thicker or thinner, is it going to be most helpful to actually, press that button to activate my people? That's what I'm doing. I'm trying to find a diagnostic tool to say to people, how do we motivate you the best? Sometimes you're motivated by this big, wonderful idea that we can all get behind, but sometimes it just seems a little bit too big, and it doesn't hit me, and it doesn't move me. So I need something very specific. Or sometimes it might be just too specific, and that's not working for me. And if I could just zoom out a little bit, I would actually be motivated much more. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So we are going to go back into your same groups. Let's do the same groups, Emily, as before. Just for sit. Is that okay? Or you want to do, I had said pairs. Pairs. You got it ready for pairs? We're going to do pairs. We're going to do pairs. I'm improvising too much. We're going to do pairs. You're going to go back into Chavruta with one of the people who you were with before, and you're going to have just 5 or 6 minutes. I want you to try and apply this to something in your team that you would like to motivate more, right? It could be a person or it could be the whole team. You want to motivate them stronger than they are now, and you're going to try and use these questions. Do they know the values? If not, how should you tell them the values more? And if they do, how does this thick and thin idea help you push them to greater motivation? Okay, you're gonna get. Let's do 3 minutes each, because otherwise we're going to run out of time. Okay, it's not very long, but see what you can do. Emily's going to send you away. Welcome back.
I joined
Welcome
Julie.
back.
We went to Malibu.
I think, well, both of you, yes. Well, that's good to see that you identify with each other now. Excellent. Okay, so we're going to just wrap it up, and I want to ask you. We didn't, of course, there's a lot more to be said about this, and I'm sort of assuming that everyone has a lot more to say. I'm going to just ask you to finish up by answering the question that I'm about to put in the chat. Which is, one thing that I am now going to do with my team is, okay, that's the question. If you can just take a minute, reflect on the channels of persuasion, the ideas about how to inspire people through values, which we really didn't do proper justice to, I have to admit. But just think about that. One thing that I'm now going to do with my team is, finish that question, put it in the chat. Pick a specific value to work on. Yes. Consider a values discussion with my advisory committee. Think about channels of persuasion. Find a way, yes, to ask her what she understands the values to be, even if values don't motivate her that much. Have better clarified. Yep. Good. Any others? Great. Most of these really focus on communication, actually. Communication about these values and about what motivates us. Right? We can be motivating other people by talking explicitly about what motivates us. Great. So I would ask you to definitely try and make sure you do those things that you think you should try now. I would ask you to think about what's motivating your team and how you can use values to motivate them. And I'll just say it's now on the hour, so I'm sure that you will have other things to do and other places to go. I will be here for the next 15 minutes hanging out for anyone who wants to talk more about this or anything else M² related. I will send you all a copy of that Channels of Persuasion list, and I will be back here this time next week to talk about how to listen to your team in a powerful and useful way. So you're welcome to M² offerings. Thank you for joining us. Please fill in the evaluation survey that you should receive in about half an hour. Always good to get your feedback. Lovely to see you all. Bye.